All right, so there is no cushioning this one. Here you go. Will anyone still believe in God in 50 years? An odd question. Maybe it is, but here's why we're asking it. Today, more people than ever are questioning God's existence. 5 years ago, 83% of people, 83%, under the age of 30 said they never doubted the existence of God. Now that number is down to 68%. So joining me to talk about this is Linda Lascola, who helps preachers openly question their faith, and then David Silverman, who is the president of American Atheists Incorporated. Thank you guys for joining us. You cannot deny the numbers. More people are having doubts now. Could we be looking at a gradual phasing out of God over the next several decades? I'm going to start with you, Ms. Lascola.
The question again, please?
Why are we seeing a doubt in the existence of God recently with so many, especially young people now?
Well, I can only speculate. The work I have done is conducting research with clergy who have lost their faith, clergy who no longer believe the supernatural. And what they tell me, and these are generally older people, at least over 30, what they're telling me is that they really wanted to believe, and they really did believe for many, many years. They dedicated their lives to believing. But at some point, the evidence outweighed their beliefs.
Yeah.
And information is so much more available now through the internet, and I know that's what young people are telling you. They were on the show earlier today on CNN, and there's just a lot of information out there that was not available before. It's really, I think, that simple.
Is this a gradual phasing out, you believe, Mr. Silverman, over the next several decades?
Yes, I do believe we're going to see not so gradual a phasing out of religion over the next several decades. I don't think religion will go away completely, but I do think that in 50 years, those few religious believers left will be pitied, and churches will be paying fair shares of taxes. And I want to underscore what Linda said. It is all about communication, and it is all about the internet, and that's what's causing it. Atheists used to feel like they were the only ones, and that was repeated. It was my own experience. But nowadays, any atheist out there, anybody who doubts, can go onto Facebook or MySpace or LiveJournal or Reddit and find millions of atheists just like them. And they can trade information, and they can learn quite a bit, and that is why we're going to see such a dramatic decline in the future. The
young people we had on earlier were echoing the same thoughts that you are. What about the political implications for all of this? I want you to look at that and then answer if you think there are going to be any. Close to 80% of the U.S. population considers themselves some form of Christian. 16% now say they are unaffiliated. So do you think that we'll be seeing more voters not really caring about the religious beliefs of their candidates, as we have seen so much? We hear, so much, Ms. Lascola, about the evangelical vote and this vote and Mr. Romney being a Mormon and whether or not the president is a Muslim and all of that. Do you think that will matter to people eventually?
Well, once again, speaking from the research I've conducted with clergy, what I've noticed among them politically is that wherever they start out, as they lose their supernatural beliefs, they become more liberal. If they're conservative, they become more liberal. If they're already liberal, they stay liberal. They don't go the other way. Losing supernatural beliefs results, from what I've seen with the clergy that I've worked with, in becoming more liberal.
I want to play something for you from Stephen Prothero at the Boston University. Take a listen.
Well, 2/3 are saying they never, even in their entire lives, have ever doubted the existence of God. I think most of the church people I know have some mixture of faith and doubt. So I don't really see evidence here of the fact that religion is going away. It seems that religion is perhaps changing a little bit, but only about 3% of millennials, people under 30, say that they're atheists. So I don't see a lot of evidence here for a kind of secularization problem in America.
So he says there are still plenty of people who have never questioned God's existence, and the number of atheists is low. So just because you question God's existence, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't believe, Mr. Silverman.
No, it doesn't, but it doesn't also necessarily mean that you do believe to say you're a Christian. A lot of people out there are cultural Christians, cultural Jews, and they tick the Christian box just because their parents raised them as Christians, even though they don't believe in the man in the sky. And I want to go back to your other question that you made to Linda about the politicians. I think as we get grow as a nation, the atheists are going to be looking at the political candidates, and they're going to be looking at their religious beliefs with a very concerned eye, because if you believe in a man in the sky without any evidence, if you believe your underwear is magic, what else will you believe, and are you qualified to run this country if you are? This is something that we really have to ask, because when it comes right down to it, we need our politicians to be grounded and intelligent and educated, and not victims of brainwashing if we can get that.
We have been talking a lot about the people who may not necessarily be believers, may not necessarily believe, Mrs. Scola, but what about the other people around them? How, you know, now if you don't believe, people look at you for the most part, because it's a country that believes in something supernaturally, as you guys have put it. So for the people around who are believers, how might they be perceived? Might they be perceived one day coming soon as atheists are perceived now?
I'll leave that one to Dave. I really have no comment on that. I can't project the future that way. I'm sorry.
And well,
oh, I can.
Listen, it's not science. It's not rocket science here. We're just talking about data as it progresses in the future. If it continues along this vein, one can sort of take a guess about it, where we're going, where we're moving.
Well, your question was, will atheists be looked down on like will believers be looked down on like atheists are looked down on now? No. Atheists are hated because of the bigotry that comes from religion. When it switches shoes, when the religious believers are the minority, atheists are not going to hate them. They're not going to revile them. They're going to feel sorry for them, because when it comes right down to it, religious believers are usually religious because they've been so heavily indoctrinated as children, such that even intelligent, well-meaning people can just shut their mind off and believe in something ridiculous. I think that's the general feeling, as far as I'm concerned, toward most theists, and I think that's what we're going to see in the future. However, I will tell you that absolutely under no circumstances is any atheist organization that I run ever going to champion the elimination of religious beliefs. You're always going to have religious beliefs, religious freedom. You're just going to have to pay your fair share of taxes.
David Silverman, thank you. Good answers to that question. Linda, thank you as well. I am playing devil's advocate. Next, if God exists, prove it. Okay, tonight we're talking about the existence of God. The existence of God. People say all the time that God has spoken to them, but it's not always so obvious.
Moses, this is the Lord thy God, commanding you to obey my law. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, I hear you. A deaf man could hear you.
What?
Nothing, go on, forget it.
Mel Brooks in History of the World Part 1. Clearly God doesn't speak to everyone like that. In fact, one can argue no one has ever really had a documented, recorded conversation with God. In a word, proof here. Where is the proof that God exists at all? It's time to play devil's advocate. And joining me here now is Jay Baker. He's a pastor of Revolution, New York City. Revolution, New York City. He is son of Jim Baker and Tammy Faye Mesner. Jay, what is your book again?
Oh, my book's called Fall to Grace.
Fall to Grace. It's a great book, and you're actually writing another book about doubt, so I'm going to talk to you about that.
Yeah, faith and doubt.
Yes, you saw the numbers. More people are now saying they have questioned the existence of God, so I'm going to lay it out there for you.
Yeah.
What's the proof? Give me the proof, the physical proof that God exists.
Well, I think the idea that everybody sees God as this being in the sky, when really I think if you look at God as being like the grounded being. You know, God is the ground below us. God is in everything. And so for me, I can't prove to you, and that's why it's called faith. You know, if it was belief, it would be called belief. But for me, it's faith.
Mm-hmm. So, listen, a lot of people would come on and say, of course I can prove to you that there is a God. Look at the sun, look at the moon, look at the trees, how do you think the wind? And so I was talking to people on social media, Jay, and I said to them, give me some physical proof that God exists. And those were similar answers. And I said, well, what about, is there a recorded conversation? Do you have any physical proof? And so I'm really playing devil's advocate here, but there is no real physical proof, is there?
No, I mean, there's not. I mean, the sun is a pretty interesting idea just because it's an amazing thing to study. But no, there's no physical proof. And the thing, though, is we have to realize is that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is actually an element of faith. So, you know, that was said by Paul Tillich, and I really have to agree with that. I think that you can't have one without the other. When you don't doubt, you don't grow, and you don't question things. And I think it's important to question things. I think faith is becoming something else, but I also do think the church is going to shrink. I do think we're going to see less religious people because I think of all the partisan politics and how people have treated each other, and how the church has treated the gay community. So I think we're definitely going to see a decline.
And for those among us who consider themselves Christian, if you actually read the Bible and you read the red parts, the guy who was Jesus said, doubt, 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 you should doubt everything.
Well, he doubted, you know, in the Garden of Gethsemane, and also on the cross, he said, you know, God, why have you forsaken me? So we have a God that was forsaken by God. So in a way, even Christ was an atheist at one point.
Interesting. You're saying some pretty subversive things here. Listen, I want to show you a quote from the renowned physicist Stephen Hawking, and he says, he recently told The Guardian, I regard the brain as a computer which will stop working when its components fail. There is no heaven or afterlife for broken down computers. That is a fairy story for people afraid of the dark. And Hawking says he has come to this final conclusion. That's his final conclusion. Listen.
It's my view that the simplest explanation is, there is no God. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate.
Arguably one of the greatest minds of our time. Do you think people are starting to see heaven as a fairy story?
Yeah, I think so. I think it started when people started questioning hell, and now, you know, people question heaven. And I think what's important is that we don't live for life after death. You know what I mean? We have life before death, and that we love each other and we focus on helping one another. And necessarily you don't have to have religion for that. But for some of us, it's a comfort. For some of us, it's shown us a whole new world. Like I'm obsessed with the idea of grace, you know, because of the Bible and the church.
Hey, listen, I have to run, but I want to ask you, why are you writing a book on doubt?
Because it's something I've dealt with over the past years. You know, I doubt just as much as anybody else does. And I think it's important to realize that doubt is part of faith. It is an element of faith, and it's okay to, you know, to have. So I just want other people out there. I think so many people have feared over the years of doubting. But now that we have computers and, you know, the internet and Facebook and stuff, everybody's talking, everybody's able to share their doubts. Yeah. Which is a powerful thing, and we shouldn't ever have the ability to tell someone they can't doubt or they shouldn't doubt. Yeah. You can't do that anyway. You're going to doubt everything. Yeah.
I said to Jay during the break, I said, Jay, I want some physical proof. You have to show me. And he said, what should I do, make fire fly out of my hand? But, but you didn't do that.
All right. No, it's all done.
Jay Baker, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Don.
All right.
Speculate. The work I have done is conducting research with clergy who have lost their faith, clergy who no longer believe the supernatural. And what they tell me, and these are generally older people, at least over 30, what they're telling...
Silverman, who is the president of American Atheists Incorporated. Thank you guys for joining us. You cannot deny the numbers. More people are having doubts now. Could we be looking at a gradual phasing out of God over the next several decades? I'm going to start with you. 3% of people, 83%, under the age of 30 said they never doubted the existence of God. Now that number is down to 68%. So joining me to talk about this is Linda Lascola, who helps preachers openly question their faith, and then David. All right, so there is no cushioning this one. Here you go. Will anyone still believe in God in 50 years? An odd question. Maybe it is, but here's why we're asking it. Today, more people than ever are questioning God's existence. 5 years ago, 83...
Lascola. Well, the question again, please?
Why are we seeing a doubt in the existence of God recently with so many, especially young people now?
Well, I can only